IDM is a musical genre whose roots date back to the 90s, with acts such as Aphex Twin pioneering the sound. It's a genre that I've always been fascinated by because of just how interesting it can be. Talking about acid house, however, is a different beast on its own. However, Aphex Twin decided to meld these two styles together on his albums such as the Richard D. James album and I Care Because You Do. Now, unfortunately, ever since the 90s, IDM has had a ripple effect with artists that think that they can become the next big thing in electronic music. And that brings us to John Frusciante. You might be thinking, what does John Frusciante have to do with anything? He did make albums that in 2012 and 2014 weren't that good, trying to blend the sound of drum and bass music and art rock and experimental rock. It pretty much fell flat on its face on arrival. And then he thought, let me try again, and it fell flat on its face again. So John decided to take the sound to his side project, Trickfinger. Debut album in 2015. This is his follow-up to that album. And I've always wondered if there can possibly be kind of a bad sound to acid house and IDM and just in general electronic music. Okay, maybe not electronic music in general, because I have heard boring and bland EDM, but that comes more often than not with the territory. However, IDM music is more sophisticated and more intelligent and more so there shouldn't be that many bad albums in the genre if you have artists really taking the time and effort and putting the work in to create at least a decent song, let alone an album. Unfortunately for this album and for John Frusciante, he didn't come through with a project that I would think is anywhere near good. Despite that though, there are some aspects of this album that are kinda good, I guess. You have the track NOICE, which features these very frantic hi-hats that introduce us to the track. It has a very nocturnal and eerie vibe to it. The only problem with this song, however, is that it reminds me so much of the opening track to the Richard D. James album, just without the strings, however. It definitely takes it to a more eerie route, but still, it's not that interesting in terms of IDM music. The opening track, Amb, is a song that is so generic it could easily fit into any kind of like IDM preset. I'm talking about when you play a game that's music oriented, where you have to put on a song to play the game. This is in like the catalog of songs that come downloaded with the game that have very generic and plain song titles, like they're just Complex Number 4, IDM Song Number 1. Listening to the song, that is immediately what I think about. The track BRISE or BRISE isn't any better. It is really bland. I'm talking the really simplistic, the most simplistic and rudimentary kick patterns and snares, and these set synths. Like, they're already set when you come with the synth. Like, it's already there. The synthesizer's already preset to the synth. Why John didn't change anything about it, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't come with the synth, but still, it sounds like a preset. It sounds like it was already made for him. And not that you have to make your own synths, but this just sounds incredibly rudimentary. You have the final moment on this record, CYXS, which has a sort of pleasant vibe with it until the last leg of the song, where it just completely falls apart. I'm talking the kicks are out of tune, they're off tempo, everything is just really hectic and frantic, which is very out of character for this song, because at the beginning it was very mellow and calm and serene, bordering on an ambient track, really. And that brings me to another point about this album that I just find really detestable, is that the songs lack progression. Like, there is no progression. Now, the single piece of progressive thought put into this, it felt like John was really just kind of creating these songs in the moment, and you can really tell because he's just adding another piece to the song, starting off with something kind of simplistic and then kind of removing things, adding a new thing, removing things, adding a new thing, and then ending the song. That happens on the track Plane, especially on Plane, where the song sounds like something I would toy around with on like my phone. Like I download an app where I could kind of have a preset to me and I can just press a button and it plays this loop over and over and over again. That sounds exactly what John is doing on this record, on every single song. And not that that's a bad thing, but it's super obvious. And if he's not doing that, man, you need lessons. You need some work. Work needs to be done. Now, the one thing this album does have going for it is just how pleasant it is to the ears. Look, nothing is really just annoying or really just off the wall. Like everything sounds very gentle and calm, despite some of the songs having an eerie vibe. It is very childlike. So while this album does have a somewhat pleasant sound to it, and it does sound pretty rudimentary, I am so surprised that this record is 27 minutes long. Even though there are only 6 tracks and they all run over 4 minutes, this album, God, it feels so incredibly long. Again, the songs on here have no progression and momentum to them. They are flat and lifeless on arrival. And there isn't much of a rhyme or reason to these tracks. They just seem like ideas that John had floating around and thought, let me just put them on an album and call it a cohesive project. Look, I'm all for albums sounding like a collection of songs rather than an experience. Look at Selected Ambient Works 85 through 92. Look at 2012 through 2017. Those songs complemented each other in a great way. This album, it's like all of the songs cancel out the best benefits of one another. I'm baffled by how super simple and rudimentary this album is, and just how boring it is despite its short runtime. Even then, the project isn't abhorrently bad. I mean, there are some songs on here, rather passages of a song, that sound fine to the ears, and the track NOICE is not terrible. It's definitely, in the context of this record, a highlight. And Rhyme 4 is somewhat good as well, but unfortunately this record, there was nothing about it that made my interest peak in any way, shape, or form. I was really on autopilot listening to this record, which is not a thing you should do when listening to any album. I was so bored listening to this record. I was just like, oh God, why? So yeah, while this album is boring, it is another thing. It is proof that in the genres of IDM and acid house, or really any genre, you're gonna have bad albums. And this album is an example. For me at least. Personally, this album is an extremely light C-. However, I am curious to know, what are your thoughts and opinions on this album down below? Let me know what albums you want me to review next, and that is it. Leave a like, comment, share, do whatever you want. Let me know how I can improve future videos down below. Remember, this is only my opinion, because music is subjective.